Good evening, and welcome to my lair. I am Dr Supernova, and tonight on the show, we're going to be interviewing the heinous Associate Professor Kuldip Sidhu about stem cell research. Now, if that doesn't pump you for some evil, I don't know what will. So, instead of wasting your time, let's get straight to the show, right after these subliminal messages.
Thus, instead of doing a certain amount of electrical work in exchange for gasoline, Mr. Kelly pays for the gas with $5. Yes, the same $5 bill today received at the hardware store. Not long ago, Tom Haywood got a $1,000 fine by trading attachments for it. Swapping like this works well between friends.
55% copper, alloyed with 5% tin and zinc. Carefully weighed out in small units, they're placed in a separate box in the melting crucible, along with the pigs of pure copper.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. Please take a seat.
This is mine, yeah. So, Kuldip, if you're going to suggest that stem cell research is the third pillar of medical science, what are the first two?
I think it's very critical with the evolution of human medicine over a period of time. In early 50 came the revolution where we talk about the small molecules. Most of the drug in the market at the moment are the small molecule. When we say small molecule means they are really small, they can pass through the capillary, go into the cellular mechanism, regulate the process. So people have been using those small molecules to regulate some of the disease process in the human body, and they've been used for therapeutic purposes. It started in the early 50s and it's still continuing. And that was the first pillar of medicine. Insulin, the extracted from the animals were used as a small molecule to start with. And then came the revolution started in 1980 onward, is the biologics. Now this is just an extension of small molecule. The biologics are also small molecules, but they are synthesized. They are produced by biological phenomena, by a complicated process of genetic engineering or by DNA hybridoma technology. And all these vaccines, monoclonal antibodies, other small molecules can modify the disease process that's been used therapeutically for humans. So this is the third pillar of human medicine, and that has led to the third pillar. You raised the question of stem cell as emerging and third pillar of human medicine for therapeutic purposes.
Yeah, excellent. Kuldip, what's in the way of cellular engineering becoming a foundational science for stem cell research? And is it there yet? Has it got a little way to go before it's fully developed? Or are we ready to move ahead with cellular engineering?
That's a good question. I think when you talk about biologics, say, for example, to synthesize some of those compounds, the small molecules and small compounds you produce in the lab by using biological process, you need genetic engineering. So this engineering is an important component to develop those biologics. And the fundamental science of developing those molecules has played dividend to produce those biologics and biological molecule used for therapeutic purposes. I think we have gone through the whole rigor of using engineering as a tool and develop those biologics. And then now the biologics had gone from foundational science to clinical science, where we can utilize some of those molecules and compound therapeutically for the treatment of many of the diseases. So we have gone through the rigor, and this particular field is quite mature at the moment.
Yeah, so if we can find cells that are naturally therapeutic in the human body or elsewhere, can we find cells that are naturally destructive? And if so, how would we go about manipulating those to be more effective in being aggressive towards the human body?
I think human body is very robust. I mean, there are two components. You talk about the regenerative ability of the human body. So for example, we have 220 different types of cells in our body, and they constitute different tissues. And each tissue harbor a localized adult stem cell, which are involved in regenerative process in the tissue. Say for example, in a skin injury, some of the stem cells residing in the skin tissue bring about the regeneration. So those cells are very critical to repair under those conditions. And similarly, say for example, when we are talking about the bone marrow, which is sort of a organ and the tissue which bring about the regeneration and also bring about defense mechanism in our body. So it fights diseases from inside out. And this is a defense mechanism. If some sort of, because of genetic load or because of some mutations, your own defense system become altered, and that turn against you, that bring about all sort of ailment in human body, and that can be very destructive. Say, for example, in rheumatoid arthritis, similarly diabetes, dementia, they're all sort of immune response caused by some alteration, genetic or environmental, bringing that immune system against your own body. But having said that, the regeneration caused by those stem cells in the tissue, as well as these destructive cells, can be used and exploited for therapeutic purposes, and that's where the developments are going.
Yeah, okay. Now, I was really interested in trying to find out how we can use some of these techniques to create more innovative forms of evil, essentially. Now, is it possible to create a cell or some other kind of organic compound that could target a neuron, for example, pump it with water and force the cell to lyse? Do we have this kind of control over genetics, or is this something where we can't build any machine that we want?
Well, theoretically, everything is possible, and genetic engineering has given us an insight to do those kind of experiments in the petri dish. Say, for example, you can genetically engineer the cell in such a way that, say, for example, you can put a suicidal gene into that cell, and then you can trigger that suicidal gene from outside by giving a drug like doxycycline. So if that particular gene is triggered by doxycycline, and that is already situated in, say, for example, a neuron in your brain, and you trigger that particular suicidal gene, all the cells sitting in there can be killed by triggering on the suicidal gene in those cells. So theoretically, that is possible.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. I'll have to note that one down. I also was really interested in regards to ethics. Obviously, this is a really heated area. I was wondering whether the ethics of stem cells are bound exclusively to religious purposes around the beginning and the origins of life. And I was more particularly concerned with the fact that we have state-sanctioned death. Isn't it ethical to sanction the death of a fetus? Is there an argument around that? This is a two-pronged question. One about whether you feel that it's only unethical if you're religious, and two, whether you feel that the fact that it's alive is an issue.
I think it's a good question. I mean, still the stem cell research is considered as unethical in some of the religious groups, despite the fact that we have a legislation in place to do stem cell research using human embryos. And this particular legislation was passed in 2002 with the extensive public consultation. So there is no reason that we should raise issue that we cannot do research on stem cell based on derived from human embryos. But having said that, but still people keep some of the ethical issues always as a point of discussion. I respect that. But if you ask me personally as a stem cell expert, I would say it would be very unethical not to use those spare embryos for human health purposes. So this would be very unethical from my personal perspective. So that ethical issue will remain, but people are quite well educated in how these embryos are available, and we can extract those embryonic stem cells and use for therapeutic purposes. But people have taken it very seriously from the perspective that since there is an ethical issue using human embryos for derivation of stem cell, in 2006, Japanese Nobel laureate Shinya Yamanaka, I had the privilege to work with him, and he produced similar kind of cell, not having to use human embryo, but by an adult reprogramming process called IPS technology, induced pluripotent stem cell technology. So that has taken the question away from ethical debate in the arena, and that has moved the field quite forward. But I still feel that we should allow using human embryos to drive those stem cells for therapeutic purposes.
Yeah, excellent. So do I. Therapeutic or evil purposes, in my opinion. We'll be right back after these messages.
Those muscles relax.
With this one, I don't have to lay it down to get into it.
This would be an example of a poor sleeper.
A battery of tests she has conducted on thousands of children in her lab.
This narrow
They listen to an argument. Those who are poor need it most.
Brain reactive muscles to muscles.
Powstanie ośrodka klinicznego zajmującego się pacjentami byłaby naturalnym rozwojem.
Welcome back. We're still here with Professor Kuldip Sidhu, and we're now moving on to one of the most popular sections on this show. It's called Lizard Watch, and this is where we try and find out who's really in control of your field and issues around conspiracy. So the first question I have for you is, I've been doing a little bit of extra reading, and I found out about companies such as Gentech, Genzyme, Amgen, and a lot of people seem to be identifying these companies as being separate from Big Pharma in the sort of traditional provides sort of sense, you know. In what ways do these companies have different forms of power to traditional Big Pharma? And are they latently evil? Are they actively evil? Or are they just not even trying?
Well, the question is, I think we have a concern that big pharmas are not involving wholeheartedly for stem cell-based therapeutics because of risk involved, because of the ethical issues involved. So it's all concerned with all the community who is working getting out research on stem cell, and that's a point of concern. But these companies you referred to, the small biotech company, in a way, sort of they have been very clever to find a niche which is very different than big pharma. Big pharmas are concentrating more on developing drug for therapeutic purposes as small molecules. Say, for example, they synthesize those products and then go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial, and they are focusing because there's more money in there. Whereas the biotech company you referred to are focusing not on the first pillar of medicine, the small molecule, but they have found a niche to concentrate more on the second pillar of human medicine, that is biologics. So they are using biological process to synthesize, again, the small molecules. But those small molecules are acting in a different way in human body, which is a biologics. So they regulate the disease process in human and use therapeutically. So this is a nice, very nice niche for those biotech companies to concentrate on using genetic engineering, monoclonal antibodies development, and hybridoma technology. So they are using all those technology which develop over a period of time and develop those biomolecules which are revolutionizing the human health as well. So they are surviving very well on that issue.
Yeah, so in terms of corporate power, they are very focused exclusively only in finding profits at the frontier of research. You don't see something like in Big Pharma where, you know, a trial might go out, the medicine might not be as effective as considered, and it's continually sold because it's still profitable. There's other forms of power plays here, or it's just not something we've observed?
Well, I mean, this is a power game in the sense that, say, for example, developing any drug by Big Pharma costs about $4 billion to produce one tablet on your table. Paracetamol, say, for example. So they are the big players. So they want to develop a drug so that they recoup that money as soon as possible. And their focus is in that direction. Whereas the small biotech company, they are focusing more on delivery, which is based on biological process, which is very relevant. And this is actually evolving much faster than the drug discovery. I mean, even the big pharmas are inclined a little bit towards this area. So there is going to be a marriage down the track with big pharma and the small biotech company to pursue this second pillar of medicine, and including stem cell therapeutics.
And what do you think the ramifications for, let's say, gene patenting are in stem cell research, maybe 5 years down the track, 10 years down the track?
But there is a lot of sort of debate going on whether you can patent a gene or not. But some of the states, they allow patenting a gene, human gene, like BRCA gene and other genes are already patented. So stem cell based genes, this debate will continue. But I'm in the favor of, like, in order to develop any product down to the track of the market and bringing it to the bedside of the patient, you need to follow through the process of putting a patent on it, disseminating that knowledge through that patenting process, and then developing a technology which is relevant to patients.
And where can you see an encroachment? At what level, since these are synthetic, organic molecules, well, not even molecules, it could be cellular, it could be a bunch of things. where is there a line where it stops being a human and starts being a medicine, or it stops being information that we've gathered from, you know, an animal and starts being a medicine? And where does patenting regard the human body's materials in that sense?
Well, that's a complex question in the sense that you cannot patent any part of the human body, but there are provisions where you be using stem cell, you can produce those organs in the petri dish. So the patent is going to come down to that level where you develop any tissue or develop any accessory body in the petri dish can be patented down the track. Like, say, for example, there are a number of laboratories worldwide working on developing a mini brain in the petri dish. My lab is also involved in that. So the patent will come through it, and then you need a funding to promote that particular area. So that particular area will be a sort of an active area where people will talk about whether we can patent it or not. But I personally feel that you need to protect your intellectual property to move it forward.
Excellent. So thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have anything that you'd like to inform our audience about that you have coming up? Maybe a paper, maybe a presentation?
Well, I have a very special privilege. As I said, I work with the Novel area, Yamanaka, and we published our data. We worked for 5 years in a consortium, internet consortiums, and published a paper in Nature Biotechnology. Now, this field being very new at the moment, it is developing. It's the third pillar, as I said. Stem cell-based therapeutics is the third pillar of medicine emerging. And I'm just making a statement that please dig deep, because the public money alone will not serve to promote this field. So everybody should contribute and wedge in and promote facilitating the research in stem cell so that we can translate what is happening in the lab to the bedside for the patient.
Okay, well, fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Now there is a man who knows how to come up with an evil scheme. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of The Lair. If you tune in next week for our final episode in this series, you'll be able to see Professor Andrew Jakubowicz talk about some of the ways we can use the Australian government's treatment of multiculturalism to oppress a broader range of people. Thank you so much, and I will see you then.